Hey,
Everybody,
Robbie!
been a minute.
It has been. You gonna leave me hanging?
Did you freeze? Okay, I don't know. We're back again after a long time.
It's been a while. He left me hanging.
It's
How's
been
it
a
going?
while since we. I don't even know the lyric.
Doesn't matter.
And hold our head up so high. So, first thing I'm going to admit is that we are re-recording this part. The first little bit of this video got lost, so we're just re-recording it. So after we get after the first two albums that we both talk about, then it's genuinely the first recording. In typical Sound of Music fashion, there was technical issues.
Basically, we each lost our number one and number two picks.
Yeah. Wait, number one and number two picks. What are we talking about? This was your idea. You explain to the people what this video is about.
Yes, I'll add the context there. So, as you may have saw on the thumbnail, that this record we're gonna be talking about 5 records that each of us chose from our record collections out of random. In a second, we'll talk about our process because we did approach it a little differently. But shout out because the idea of this video came from the vinyl community YouTuber Norman Maslov. Refers to himself as Mazzy, but Norman Maslov is the name of the channel. He's one of my favorite vinyl community YouTubers. Check him out, please. He does a series called Whack-A-Mole, where out of his record collection, and he'll do it during the recording, where he'll just pick 5 to 10 records just out of his collection. And unlike this small shelf over here, the man has to have like 20 ginormous IKEA shelves.
Wow.
So that's really fun to watch. Check Mazzy out. Like I said, he's awesome. But that's where the inspiration for this video came from. So I did cheat a little bit in that I did randomly pick my 5 records ahead of time. I did close my eyes. But the main reason why I did that was because I do have a few in my collection that I just haven't gotten around to yet. And of course, those were some of the ones that I picked. So I wanted to avoid that. So I did make a couple reattempts with my eyes closed until I came up with my 5. But you said you had a different process. So talk to us about
my
that.
process was that I, because I'm not recording in the same room that my records are, what I did was I totally randomly picked 5 records. They're all in, I recently moved, so they're all in boxes right now, in 5 boxes actually. So that worked out really well. Mm-hmm. So I randomly picked 1 record from each of those boxes, put them in here, which I think I said the first time we tried recording this, it took me longer to put them in the bag with my eyes closed than to take them out. But, and I have them in here. These first 2 records, I'm not going to lie, since we already recorded, I already know what these 2 are. But when you get to the next 3, those are my genuine first reactions. So takes away from it a little bit because we lost the other recording. But either way, 5 random records, and big plug to Factory Records in Dover, New Jersey. Amazing record store, which I believe is the last place that I saw you in person.
Yes, so, Dover, New Jersey, by the way.
Yes.
Not Andover, New Jersey. But yes, that is the last time we did see each other. And I had 2 attempts now where I could have done what you did, but I didn't. So whatever, that's okay.
Now you have no excuse. So go ahead. What's your first record that you picked?
Before I get into my first record, I do just have to say really quick, and for the audio-only listeners, you can't see what I'm doing. But today's video is brought to you by the letter P. There you have it. I got the Pixies. You've got the Pink Floyd.
I got double
that's
Pink Floyd.
out of my system now. You got a lot of Pink Floyd. This is true. I love that transparent flag. Anyways,
it's cool. It's great.
All right. Take 2 for my first pick. If not my favorite by this artist, it's in the top 3 to 5 for sure. Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks. This is a fantastic record. I just got this pretty recently in a record store in New Hope, PA, which great place to go record shopping. It's just a neat area. If you ever get a chance to check it out. But Blood on the Tracks. This is, I don't know if this is necessarily a first pressing of this record, but it is a 75 pressing nonetheless, as per Discogs. And yeah, man, this is just my favorite era of Dylan, this record and the one after it, Desire, which may be my favorite Dylan record. They're just so good. Just heartbreaking, emotional. Dylan was just in the proceedings of getting a divorce by his wife, Sarah, I believe. Yeah, Sarah, because there's a song off Desire named Sarah. But anyways, this record's kind of where it started, and Desire kind of picks that up with further instrumentation. But this record, it's like this and Joni Mitchell's Blue are like the ultimate breakup records. This album opens up with one of my favorite openers on any album, Tangled Up in Blue, which definitely just sets the vibe, and it's just only gonna go down from there as far as the floodgate of emotions. Second track, Simple Twist of Fate's one of my favorites. Idiot Wind, though, may take the cake. If not, Simple Twist of Fate is my favorite off the record. 7 minutes of just Dylan belting out his emotions. And one of the things I said on our first take of talking about this record is, I see the salty face there, is that I know it's pretty popular to think that Dylan isn't the greatest singer. I know you're one of those people that feels that way.
Again, still love him though.
Yeah, of course. My take on that is, yeah, technically he's not a great singer, but sometimes that's okay.
Yeah.
Because the emotion makes up for it. But not only does the emotion, the way he lets it out, but the way he and I've said this in other videos before, the way he just phrases things, certain words and phrases, the way he enunciates, right, is just, it's almost bar none in my opinion. But with that being said, a song like Idiot Win, I think showcases that he can be a good singer in his own right. Side 2 is just as brilliant as side 1. Like Tangled Up in Blue, I think Buckets of Rain is one of the best ways to close a record. It's so subtle, and at that point, it's just Dylan and his acoustic guitar, and just that fade out in the end. I can go on about this record. That's not what this type of video is, but Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks.
Beautiful. I mentioned last time we recorded, one of my favorite Dylan albums too, and I love the production on it and on Desire. Those two albums are really, really, really good. I like them a lot. I agree. My first one is Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die by the great Jethro Tull, one of my favorite bands. So the funny thing about this out, even on the re-recording, you gotta give me some sass. The funny thing about this record is, of all of Tull's 70s albums, it's probably the one I'm least familiar with. I have listened to it about maybe 3 times, I would say. There's a couple tracks I really like. Salamander is probably my favorite track off the album, a cool little acoustic number. Very intricate in the playing, but also the lyrics are really cool. Obviously, the anthemic Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. One of Tull's, like, I guess you could say, biggest hits. I don't know if it was quite a hit, but it's one of the most well-known songs. Quiz Kid. Bad Eyed and Loveless. That's actually a really good song. That's a cool one. The idea behind this album was, it's a concept album about a aging rock star who's basically he's kind of goes from being on top to the bottom, and then kind of clawing his way back up to the top. Sort of the whole Spinal Tap thing before Spinal Tap. So one thing I love about this record, and with most of Tull's recordings from this period, is the gatefold, which has this cool comic book inside it, which is about the story of the album. Pretty neat. And overall, I don't know, the design of it's cool. It's an album that I'd like to listen to more of, because I really do love that period of Jethro Tull. I'm quite familiar with their catalog, but for being like a classic 70s era album, it's one that I don't really know a lot about. So there you go. Jethro Tull, Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. Listen to it if you haven't, unless you're Andy, which I know you won't.
Ian Anderson looks like he's looking to pick a fight there.
Yeah. You were saying that. Yeah.
listen, and I'm sure you would say probably not the record to start with. One of
No,
these days,
not at all.
I do want to go back to them because I feel like maybe I'm just missing something. I don't know, but I'm
Yeah.
also prolonging that because I just want to continue to make fun of them.
Okay, fair enough. We can always make fun of him. I mean, I love Bob Dylan, but I still make fun of him.
Fair enough.
You know?
Fair enough.
What's your number two?
My number two. Well, you know my number two.
I guess I do, but what the audience doesn't know.
But the audience does not. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. Probably my number one for 1970. And it's just one of those records that I have personal attachment to as well. Look at this bad boy. Miles Davis, Bitches Brew. First of all, this is probably my favorite gatefold. Other side.
So good.
Look at that. Good. I want a poster of this so bad.
Yeah, you need to get one.
So the reason why I said that there's personal attachment to this record, not this copy. I have a quadraphonic sound copy as well that I don't have the means to play that version, but I point that out because my fiance, soon to be wife, our first date ever, 8.5 years ago, we went to a record store down by the college where we first met called Music Jukebox, another fantastic record store in Stroudsburg, PA. Check that out if you're in the area. But she'll tell you her version of the story. We were in the record store for 2 hours. We were there for 1 hour. But the record
again, it probably felt like 2 hours to her.
Sure.
Maybe three.
But the record I did purchase that day was this guy right here, Bitches
Great
Brew.
album.
And it's a fantastic album. You know, it's funny because just recently I played it for her for the first time. And I don't remember what came about with that other than I was just like, hey, I've never played this for you before. Because like I'll always, like, whenever we talk about our first date as couples do, I'll always quiz her, be like, what record did I buy? You know, to keep her on her toes. And most of the time she gets it right. But you know, we were on a long car ride down to Maryland visiting some friends, and it just seemed like the perfect opportunity. And she's like, yeah, why not? And I'm thinking she's not going to like it. To my surprise, she did. And while in a way, this is not the most accessible record in the world, there is an ambience to this album that I think most people that just enjoy music, whatever your musical tastes may be, can just get something out of this record. I really do. And she really vibed with it. She liked it a lot, which of course made me happy. But yeah, man, I mean, this is just, it's a perfect record. And even though it's a perfect record, it's still only my second favorite by the man. That's got to go to In a Silent Way, the record he put out before. But again, these are both like in my probably top 50, if not even 25.
Wow. Okay.
That's how much I love this record, let alone In a Silent Way. But my favorite track off this record, despite them all being great, is Miles Runs the Voodoo Down. I keep wanting to say town, but it's down. Very funky, very Sly and the Family Stone kind of influence, which, speaking of, that's another thing. Miles was on top of what was going on currently. Unlike his contemporaries, his jazz contemporaries, that is, he knew that he had to keep up. And he was inspired by your Jimi Hendrixes, your Sly Stone, your Funkadelic, George Clinton, Isaac Hayes, so on. Nina Simone was another influence. And you hear that on this record. But again, it's also clearly a Miles Davis record at the same time. This whole record's an experience. It's a long record, but it doesn't feel long. And under the right mood and circumstances, it's definitely a fun trip.
Nice. Cool. It wasn't that around the time he was at the Isle of Wight festival too, like 70, yes. 71. Yeah, so cool. Probably, I think he was like one of the only jazz artists, if the only jazz artist there.
I believe he was. And fun fact, before you do your number two, if you're familiar with the Neil Young live album, Live at the Fillmore, I think it's just called, that show, Miles was Neil's opening act.
Oh wow.
So
That must
can
have
you
been
imagine
really
seeing
weird.
Miles Davis and Neil Young?
Yeah, that goes to show you how weird some of the pairings were back then. So
That's why the 70s is the greatest decade.
I totally agree.
But anyways, your number two.
My number two is another prog album, Rick Wakeman, Journey to the Center of the Earth, which is probably his best, at least from this period, solo record. Love it. It's played with an orchestra. There's some narration in it about like the story of Journey to the Center of the Earth, obviously based off the Jules Verne book. Really cool album. I would highly recommend it in terms of his solo stuff. I think it's worth your time. Probably his most successful record, actually. I think it charted at like number in like the top 10. Wow. Even over here in the States. I actually originally heard about this album from my dad, who didn't even really know Yes very well, actually, but knew this album, which is kind of funny. But as you and I well know from doing the Bowie series and everything else, Rick Wakeman's been everywhere. This is a cool one. This is another one of those albums where basically the whole album is one song. It's just side one is The Journey and side two is The Battle, or sorry, The Journey, Recollection, and The Battle, The Forest. So yeah.
Nice.
My main critique with the album, I would say, is that I'm not a big fan of the vocals. It's okay. But otherwise, like, it's played with the London Symphony Orchestra. They all do a really great job. And yeah, I don't know. Look at that gatefold.
You know what I didn't ask you in the first video? I was just thinking now. I probably know the answer is no, because it doesn't look like his style. But
Sure.
Is that Roger Dean?
No, that's not Roger Dean.
Okay. Yeah, I figured.
It's just like I don't even know. It's basically Rick Wakeman with an orchestra in the center of the earth.
Okay. Well, I meant the inside of the gatefold specifically.
Oh, the inside of the gatefold. No, I don't think that's a Roger Dean. No.
Okay. Yeah, it probably isn't. It doesn't look like his style for sure.
Surprisingly, because you'd think he would do something like that for Yes.
Yeah.
For him, because he was in Yes. But I also love this little booklet. Really sort of trippy.
I love that artwork. That should have been the album cover.
I know. Or this one.
Yeah. Very psychedelic.
And my favorite is the guy conducting the iguanas, the giant iguanas.
That looks like that could be Roger Dean.
Yeah. And again, actually, I get Storm Thurgeson vibes a little bit from this.
Oh, yeah.
But the joke I made was kind of reminds me of that episode of the original Star Trek when Kirk fights the Gorn. But if you haven't seen it, you don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't know what you're talking about, but
this is a fun album. Andy, as you mentioned just before, given the right circumstances and the right vibe, if you catch my drift, give this one. Just give this a one shot, you know. So, and everybody should really listen to his new album, The Red Planet. I really love that. I think it's far and away his best album, but this is his best from his classic period. Rick Wakeman. Yeah, I was saying again, take one, when you spoke about that record, that as much as I love Rick Wakeman and I'm not familiar with his solo stuff, right?
Really, but like I love his work in Yes, but I still stand that my favorite Rick Wakeman work is his session work with other musicians. I mean, I love his playing on Bowie's Hunky Dory.
Yep.
I can't think of what else he's been on off the top of my head.
He's been on he was on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath for Black Sabbath.
Yes.
He played on the song Morning is Broken by Cat Stevens.
Mm-hmm.
That's him. He's also on a T-Rex song. I think he's on look up an interview with Rick Wakeman. He talks about Mark Bolan. He's got a really funny story about Mark Bolan. Just that kind of shows the kind of guy he is, but or he was rather. But yeah, he's got a really funny story about being on. I think it's Bang a Gong, actually.
Okay. Yeah. Nice.
So yeah,
that was a nice royalty check.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there you go, Rick Wakeman.
Rick Wakeman. All right. So what are we on? Number three.
It's your third one.
So one of the things that was frustrating, or the epiphany I had with this process, was that most of my records are 60s and 70s records. And that's because the further along you get, the more expensive vinyl gets. So
absolutely,
hopefully one day. Yeah, so hopefully one day we'll have some more variety there. So this is my newest album out of the bunch, and by newest, 1995. And that's Wowie Zowie by Pavement. And yes, before you ask me, yes, that's named after the Mothers of Invention song, Wowie Zowie.
I'm not surprised.
Want to get that out of the way. This is the 2020 reissue. What a fantastic record, first of all.
Oh, cool.
Pavement is one of my favorite 90s bands, kind of like an indie lo-fi rock band. 5 records. They're all fantastic in their own right. But this is the middle of the bunch, and this is a double record. And this is my favorite Pavement record. Probably the more difficult ones to get into. Anybody new to the band, I wouldn't start out with this record, but this is the one right here. It's kind of like their White Album in a sense, where the songs are just all over the place, different genres, different influences. The opening track, We Dance, which is my favorite track off the record, is not an opener, and that is done intentionally. So you think we're going to go in this, okay, Pavement's getting a little subtle here. And then we go into a track 2, a song like Rattled by the Rush, which is just typical Pavement, bombastic, but also very experimental as well. Hard to explain without listening to the record. But yeah, man, I just got this for my birthday, actually, from a friend of mine. And yeah, I mean, this is a great record. Fight This Generation, Grounded, Father to a Sister of Thought. So many of my favorite Pavement songs are on here. This is a song that you'll see people online try to resequence like the White Album in that sense, eliminate a lot of tracks to bring it to a much shorter, record. And I've played around with that, but I got to tell you, the more and more I listen to this record, I love it as is. I appreciate the full 55 minutes, however long this record is. And it's just a trip, man.
I assume it's a double LP.
It is a double LP.
Nice.
And this is during the CD era. So double LP looks a little different than the vinyl era. I think I said 55 minutes. Kind of an awkward length, in my opinion. And
yeah, it's like an album and a half almost,
It is. And even the vinyl, it's on 4 records, but the 4th side is completely empty because it's not that long. I mean, 55 minutes is long, but it's not, technically a double records length at least. So, but yeah, Wowie Zowie, Pavement, probably my album of the year for 95. Another spoiler alert from whenever we get to that year.
Duly noted. I'll have to listen to that sometime. I've never heard it.
I think you'll like Pavement. I think you'll like their later stuff. The 2 records after this kind of got a Neil Young vibe. Their last 2 records, that is.
Cool. Nice pick.
Yeah.
All right. Ooh.
What we got there?
Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell.
Nice. Your first non-prog pick.
Sadly, my only Sabbath album because they're impossible to find. Well, at least the originals are. The reissues you can find if you want to spend a lot of money. But yeah, this is one of my very favorite Black Sabbath albums, featuring the late great Ronnie James Dio on vocals. I got to be honest though, as much as I love this album, don't love the album cover. It's like okay, like I get it, it's kind of funny, but I think for an album this good, it could have been better. Like I guess the idea behind it, since it's heaven and hell, angels smoking cigarettes and like gambling, they could have done a better job. I do like the back with the band members, kind of reminiscent of that whole Long Live Rock and Roll Rainbow thing, but just done a little differently. What can I say about this album? This is one of my very favorite heavy metal albums of all time. I think, and you'd probably agree with me, in terms of the many singers that Black Sabbath had after Ozzy, Ronnie James Dio was far and away the best one. This album came out at a time when I think from everything that I've read historically about Black Sabbath, that they really needed a kind of kick in the ass because the band members were just all effed up on drugs, and apparently like all of the band members had really bad drug problems, but Ozzy's was so bad that they said, okay, you have to go. So this was when obviously Ozzy was kind of at a low point, which ended up working out for him well anyway, because he had a very successful solo career. And it came, and Dio had just left Rainbow. I read his autobiography about a year ago, and he had talked about how he was kind of bopping around for like about a year or so, trying to figure out what he was going to do next. And him and his wife didn't have any money, and they drove all the way from New York to California to just start all over again, because everything they had, even their house, was owned by Deep Purple's management, so it was taken away. So this was kind of like a rebirth of the band, and a rebirth for Ronnie as well. And honestly, like Neon Nights, Heaven and Hell, Die Young, Children of the Sea, Lonely is the Word. I mean, all really just fantastic songs. The songwriting's top notch in this. The playing, I really think that Ronnie kind of helped elevate the rest of the band a bit musically. And I almost kind of don't like it that this is like, I know it's the same band essentially, except for the singer, but the music is so different that it's almost hard to compare it to Black Sabbath. In my mind, there's almost like several different bands within Black Sabbath. It's not like a band like AC/DC where Brian Johnson comes in and replaces Bon Scott, and it works pretty well because he's different but similar enough, and the songs kind of have the same formula. But with Black Sabbath, it was a lot harder because Ozzy had a whole totally different vibe going. Especially the early Black Sabbath has its roots more in that kind of stoner bluesy rock, whereas this is more polished, I would say. Again, Dio was a much different singer than Ozzy, both great in their own right, but just completely different approach. But I don't know. I could say a lot about this album. I really love this album. And I think this is by far, although I do enjoy the Mob Rules as well, this is by far the best album that they did with Dio, and post Ozzy, actually. So Heaven and Hell.
Nice. Couple things on that. One, it took them to their fourth album to change the name finally, because you're right, very different sound than the Ozzy fronted version of the band. Of course, they ended up using the name Heaven and Hell on that last Dio record that they did together. I've just recently went through all of the minus 13, all the Ozzy Black Sabbath records, and I've dabbled with maybe revisiting the first two Dio records. I agree, that's the better of the two, but I will say my favorite Dio Sabbath song probably is The Sign of the Southern Cross. The Mob Rules. That song is a jam.
I'll be honest with you, I never gave the Mob Rules quite the time that I always gave Heaven and Hell, and very recently, it was like about a year ago, I listened to it, and I was listening to it again and again. I was like, wow, this is probably just as, like, if not quite there, it's on the same level. It's just as good. Dehumanizer, little, like, it's not a bad record, but it's not as good. And their last album's, I think, pretty good. But the first two albums for sure. It's a shame that they didn't do maybe at least one or two more records with Ronnie in this period. I would have been very interested to see where that it would have gone. But so it goes.
So it goes.
Oh, and also brief, by the way, little preview. The next video we might be doing, let's just say is Black Sabbath related.
Stay tuned. With no date.
Yeah.
You'll just have to find out.
We promise it'll be less than like 8 months.
On that note, so my number 4, I'm really happy that I ended up picking randomly a record by this artist. This is an artist that's been actually recently been very vital in my life. I've been going through a little bit of a change as far as a career and whatnot, and coming off of a dark, gloomy summer. And this artist's music has very much been a coping mechanism. Joni Mitchell.
Ah, yes.
Never sure if I can pronounce the title of this record right, if it's Haraja or Harija. You'll correct me in the comments if anybody comments below. I tend to get corrected on my pronunciation. So, anyways, this is an interesting record. So the record that came out before this one, The Hissing of Summer Lawns, is my favorite Joni Mitchell album. And the record prior to that, Court and Spark, was a little bit of a transition record where she started experimenting and dabbling into jazz a little more. And so that started on that record, continued with The Hissing of Summer Lawn, and kind of gets fully fleshed out on Harija or Harija. And this is a long record. This one's also just under an hour. Some of the musicians on this record, you have the legendary Jaco Pastorius, one of the greatest bassists of all time. You have, I'm blanking out on his name, guitar player. It may come to me. I won't waste any time. But this record's great. Coyote, Amelia, one of my favorite Joni Mitchell songs. The title track is fantastic. There's a song on here, Black Crow, might as well be instrumentally at least a Steely Dan song. That's just like how crisp and jazzy it sounds. This middle era of Joni, this is again right around the same time as that middle era Dylan that I was just describing earlier, is probably my favorite period of Joni. Unfortunately, this I would say is probably the last classic Joni Mitchell record. While I haven't listened to the one that was released after this one yet, I've heard that one's kind of a mixed bag. Knowing me, that might end up being one of my favorites. Who knows? But yeah, great record. And I got to tell you, Cass, if and when you're watching this, such a massive crush. I love this image of Joni right here. She's just such a badass. Your wife and I, last time I saw you guys, we had a neat conversation about this wonderful artist right here.
Very impassioned conversation. And a Canadian.
And Canadian.
As I will soon be, or close to it. Cool pick.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, what do we
Another
have?
Prague album with an orchestra. I swear that's not my whole vinyl collection. It just worked out. Actually, okay, I will. This is Procol Harum live in concert with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra. This is, aside from the Moody Blues, Days of Future Past, the best rock album that incorporates an orchestra. Amazing stuff. Gary Brooker on vocals, rest in peace, by the way. We lost him earlier this year. BJ Wilson on drums, Alan Cartwright on bass, Chris Copping on organ, Dave Bell on guitar, and Keith Reed, who does some, I guess, it's probably for In Hell Wasn't I. There's a little bit of monologuing or narration in it. This band is really cool. I think this is a band you probably like, Andrew, if you haven't looked into much of their stuff. A lot of people know them just for their hit song, Whiter Shade of Pale, which was one of those big 60s hits. They had a couple of other really good songs, a couple other like sort of minor hits like A Salty Dog, Conquistador and stuff. The definitive version of Conquistador with the orchestra is on this. It actually opens the album. One of my favorite openers on a live album ever. It starts out with that horn sound, that Spanish-y style sound. The orchestra just lifts the songs just to new heights, man. I don't know what it is. They just really worked well with the arrangements with the orchestra and everything, like A Salty Dog, because I'm pretty sure on the studio version of that song there's a little bit of strings, but with the full orchestra it really just adds a lot of atmosphere to it. And they have what is considered one of the very first prog epics, actually, In Hell 'Twasn't I, the live version of that, which is also really amazing. Just fantastic stuff. I really don't know what else to say about it. They're a great band. Definitely more on they're sort of prog light, I would say. I would be hard pressed to call them just a prog band because I mean, Gary Brooker's got a very soulful, bluesy voice. Played on other people's records, most notably George Harrison. He's on All Things Must Pass. Very, again, like kind of blues R&B based, but they incorporate those other elements later in this period in the mid 70s that give it more of a symphonic sound and more of they don't really noodle very much like a lot of other prog bands, and the songwriting is definitely there, and the orchestra, like I said, really lifts this record up. I actually really love this. Probably, I would say, honestly, top 10 live album for me right here.
Really?
Yep.
Nice. I know their debut record. I've gotten to know that one pretty well.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, but 1967 should be coming out any moment now.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, so that record came out that year, so I'm pretty familiar with it. I was looking it up while you were talking. There's a track on there called Outside the Gates of that I really dig.
Yeah. It's a cool album.
Yeah, looking forward to listening to more of them. All right, cool. So my number 5 is a prog pick.
Wow, the last one.
Not only is it a prog pick, but interesting enough, it just happens to be my favorite prog record.
Oh, okay.
And I think I gave it away to you.
Oh, yeah. Well, also I could see the corner of it.
Close to the Edge.
Down by the river.
With that wonderful Roger Dean artwork.
Oh, so good. The gatefold, probably right there, just to interrupt you, my favorite gatefold of all time. It's definitely up there. I think I got to give it to the aforementioned Bitches Brew, but fair enough.
I mean, this is gorgeous. This artwork.
Oh yeah,
there's no denying that. Love the shade of green, even just the simplicity of the main album cover. Green's my favorite color. So maybe there's some bias there, but yeah, I was just actually our mutual friend Matt, who I believe is his favorite band.
Yeah.
We just got together over the weekend, went on a hike together, and had a pretty in-depth conversation about this record. King Crimson's my favorite prog band, but this is bar none my favorite prog record. While Yes does later in their career kind of fall into what would eventually become some of the prog cliches, I think this is just such a well-balanced record, from the harmonies to the instrumentation, which doesn't stay its welcome. If there's any noodling, it serves the purpose of the song. John Anderson's vocals are excellent. His lyrics are probably his best lyrics on any Yes record, at least in my opinion. And the thing with Close to the Edge is I have a lot of records, if you go on my Rate Your Music page, that I deem 5 stars. But typically when I deem a record 5 stars, it's because I love the record. There's personal attachment. I think it's that good, but maybe there are some flaws. This record is one of the very few records that, again, I deem a 5-star record that I genuinely think is perfect.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's nothing I can nitpick about this record. I think the length of the album is perfect, just under 40 minutes. There's only 3 songs, but they're perfect. I mean, the title track is the title track. It's the greatest progressive song ever, in my opinion. But the other 2 tracks, And You and I, that song is just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful songs.
It really is. And then the closer is just Yes doing hard rock. Yeah, and it's awesome. It's so good. I really do think this is a record I can't nitpick. Everything about it is great. I've been a fan of this record for, probably close to 15 years now. It's a record you and I bond over. And it's just one of those records that I will always love.
Two points. Also, one, the musicians on it, the best lineup of Yes.
Hands down.
John Anderson, Steve Howe, Chris Squire, Rick Wakeman, and Bill Bruford. The Bill Bruford song, Swan Song with the band. And I don't know if you've ever seen records with him, or interviews with him, but what he says about that album, he goes, yeah, I realized that this was it. This was the peak. I'm done. I'm going to King Crimson.
And I kind of, again, in my opinion,
Yeah.
he might have been onto something.
I think they had some great albums after that, but Close to the Edge by far is the peak, in
this
my
is
opinion.
hands down where they peaked.
And the only other thing I want to say about that, if anybody watches this who's not really a fan of prog, I have played this for people who aren't really progressive rock fans, and I mean, you have stuff like Dark Side of the Moon, which people argue whether Pink Floyd is progressive rock or not, or something like the Moody Blues, that they have a bit more of a mass appeal than something like, you know, King Crimson or something. That is truly a progressive album, and it also, I think, has a mass appeal. I mean, number one, it was very successful, and number two, like, I know people who would not give it the time of day to a band like King Crimson or Jethro Tull or Genesis, but they like Close to the Edge, you know?
There was a time I was once the prog fan that you still currently are.
Yeah.
And while that's not really the case, I would agree. I would 100% agree with that. And just their influences. I mean,
yeah,
3 of my all-time favorite bands, the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and the Byrds, yes, draws from all 3 of those bands, but with these classical and jazz influences as well. Anybody could get into this record.
I totally agree. I can't say enough good things about that record. All right, so let's end this on
another proggier note.
No, it is not a prog one, but you're going to
good.
laugh when you see this album. And you're going to be like, wow, he has that on vinyl.
Are you kidding me? Why do you have that on vinyl?
Meatloaf, Bad Outta Hell 3. The Monster's Loose on.
That's great.
It's a double album on red vinyl.
Nice.
So we'll end this with just a fun story. If there's one album that I could probably say that I would associate with you from our heyday when we were discovering music together, it's probably this album, actually. So what's that?
I said, I don't know how I feel about that.
It's so many times singing some of these songs in my car, or like, you know, having a few drinks at a party or something, just singing this stuff. I say what you will about the man. I think Meatloaf rocks. I think aside from the original Bat album, this is his best album. Obviously the original Bat Outta Hell is amazing, produced by Todd Rundgren, amazing musicians on it. This has a lot of great guest musicians on it as well, and has some great songs on this, man. The Monster's Loose, Bad for Good, It's All Coming Back to Me Now. great album, man. I have nothing else to say. This is hilarious.
Wow. I cannot believe you have that on vinyl.
I was actually given this. Last little story about this. When I used to live in Montana, and when I left, I went over to my friend Travis's house, and we were talking. I went to say goodbye to him, and he goes, "Listen, man," he's like, "I would really like to give you one of my records." He's like, "I want you to pick any one that you want, and you can have it." So I just kind of picked a random one. I was like, you know what? I will definitely take this one. This one's awesome. And he's like, "Okay, man, it's yours. Enjoy it." So that's how I randomly have this copy of Bat Outta Hell 3.
There you go.
So there you go. Amazing.
Yes, I do recall some memories when we were teenagers blasting that record. That came out, I think, probably right around the time I met you.
Probably about like 15 years ago, maybe 2006 or something.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, the first Bat Outta Hell record will always be a stone cold classic. I'm not too sure how I feel about that record these days.
Just give it another spin, man.
But a nice trip down memory lane, I suppose.
Yeah.
Nice. But yeah, this was fun. And listen, guys, if you dug this, if you want Rob and I to do more of this, I know this wasn't in depth like some of our other videos are, but we like taking a break from those and just doing off the cuff stuff. So
yeah, and it's
I
hard
had fun doing this.
Like this one really threw me off because I haven't heard this album in a few years and don't know a lot about it. So it's like, what do you say about an album you haven't heard much of, you know?
Sure.
And that's actually the reason that I was hoping to grab the ones that were in the plastic, because I was like, okay, I'm probably more familiar with them. Because I don't know about you, you amass vinyl that, and I've purged over the years. Like I recently moved, so I purged a few. It's like, oh, I'll never listen to that, or I haven't listened to that in a long time, so I'll get rid of it. But sometimes you hold on to stuff, and it's like, you know, you just haven't heard much of it. So it's nice that we, for the most part, had a lot to say about all the albums that we picked.
Yeah, this was fun, man. All right, guys. Well, you know, like we both said, stay tuned for more content. Like and subscribe. Still don't have social media. It might happen. It might not. Who cares? But definitely subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, and definitely keep an eye out. We got a couple things in the pipeline. Andy's working on some stuff on his own. I've got a couple ideas of things on my own, and we have a few ideas for more discussion videos like this. So we'll hopefully see you soon.
Yeah. But till then,
peace.
bye, guys. Peace.